I want to start to get to know you a little bit and a little bit about your upbringing. You know, growing up with immigrant parents, it's not quite common to go into fashion. I know for me, my dad was like, absolutely not. You're not going into this world. But I would love to hear maybe more about your fascination with fashion. Was it something you always had when you were a child? And, you know, any kind of color you have there to take us back to your upbringing.
Yeah, definitely. So my parents are immigrant parents. They immigrated here from South Korea. And, you know, when they did come over here, they had a lot of small businesses that they operated and ran growing up. So my dad had liquor stores, and then he had, you know, computer, PC cafes. And my mom was also, her family was in the garment industry, and they owned sewing factories. And she had small, you know, makeup and cosmetic store boutiques that she imported product from Korea as well too. So I've always grown around very entrepreneurial parents who are extremely hardworking, and you know, really that really drove in me a sense of work ethic from an early age, as well as, you know, just like the business acumen and some of the business struggles that they went through. And I think just from an early age, I was always interested in fashion and style. And I think that really came about because I had a fabulous aunt who at the time was living between Hong Kong and London. And she was always coming to LA and taking me on this extravagant shopping trip because she always thought that the best designers they kind of started over here. And so I don't know if you remember this, but back in like 2000, you know, 4, 5, 6, we were in Robertson Drive shopping Lisa Klein. She was, you know, shopping the newest and the best. She shopped luxury, but she also shopped a lot of contemporary. And that was what was really exciting for me, to be in Intermix and Lisa Klein's of the world during that time, and discovering Rag & Bone and discovering all these really, really cool brands. And sometimes when she wasn't able to make it to LA, she would give me her credit card and ask me to go shopping for her. And, you know, she was all about what's the newest and the best, but what's also flattering and what's going to look good on me and what's an amazing sweater. So I really came to love fashion and good style, but also that kind of grew my eye for really great quality, really great construction, and really great fit. And so I would say in a nutshell, that's really what truly got me into the fashion and like the styling world. I went to school at UCLA, and when I graduated, I took my first job. Then it was a department store called Mervyn's, and I started my career in planning. And it was really crunching numbers of how to make a business profitable, right? And it was just about, you know, planning the open to buys, what styles are selling well, what styles are not selling well, and what are you going to do about it? So I think as a financial planner, it also made you responsible for the business. Not just, you know, the picking and the sorting of beautiful product, but when it works, how do you quickly chase back into it? When it doesn't work, you know, how much margins are you allotting to the business to be able to give yourself a markdown cadence and a cycle? So I think just that early start in career and planning is also what helped me kind of be able to learn a little bit more about how to manage a business profitably.
By the way, your aunt sounds amazing. I'm like, I hope to be that auntie for people. And I remember Robertson, like I got my prom dress from there. It was the place to be. Those were some good times. I miss
good times.
Those streets
Definitely.
in LA. I'm like, what happened? But I love to hear that and your story. And, you know, you mentioned immigrant family, you know, growing up, seeing their work ethic. It seems like you ended up going on the planning side, which is more like financially driven. Was that something that you want? Like, how did you know that that was the next step? Was it because you had people around you who, you know, in undergrad, I don't know what you majored in, but it's like you either become a lawyer, or you become an investment banker or consultant. So like, how did you know that planning was the right next step for you?
You know, to be completely honest, I think like many things in life, it's never a linear path forward. It's not like I graduated school and I said, okay, I'm going to go into planning. And by the way, planning is going to give me this amazing visibility into the financial world of fashion. I think, you know, I applied for many, many, many positions. And in actuality, my career path after graduating from UCLA, I was supposed to go into pharmaceutical sales.
Really?
Yes. So all of my friends and my guy friends, they were all about a year or two older than me when I had graduated. And they were all joining Eli Lilly, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. So I think, you know what you see. So when I saw them doing that and they were all telling me how great kind of the pharmaceutical sales world would be, I was totally like on that bandwagon. And I was dead set on, wanting to join one of the top 5. I made it very far along the interview process with Pfizer Pharmaceuticals during that time, almost to the point where all my friends were like, you're in, like you're gonna get in, they love you. And then something crazy broke out where they had a very large issue with one of their largest drugs. And so then they went on a hiring freeze for a little bit. And during that time is when I was like, okay, I'm gonna take the next couple of months to actually just see if this is what I really wanna do and possibly wait. And during that time, my mom had a cosmetic store. And for that cosmetic store, she would attend, once or twice a year, these trade shows that are hosted, whether it's in Las Vegas or in New York. And so during that downtime, I would follow her to these trade shows. And it just opened up my eyes to a whole nother world of fashion. And so also I was like, wow, this is a job. Like people actually come over here and sell product and they buy product. And so that's when I started attending career fairs and tapping into the world of fashion, right? And so when I looked and when I was applying for different jobs, there was an opportunity at Mervyn's to join a training program. Mm-hmm. And that training program could either lead into a job in the planning world or it could lead into a job in the buying world. I think, for me at that time, buying sounds more glamorous, so I wanted that. But the role I got was planning. And so I started off in the planning path, not because that was my number one choice, but because that was, the opportunity that was presented to me at that time. And in hindsight, I am so thankful that that is kind of like what the path, the path that I took, just because it did give me a lot more financial acumen. And, oftentimes it did tell me that ultimately you have to be financially responsible for the buys and to understand, what type of metrics are good for a sell-through, what's healthy in terms of a markdown rate, how do you manage the open to buy, and things like that.
Oh my gosh, I have like full body goosebumps just kind of hearing how you didn't get that job. You were going to go on a completely different path. And I feel like having different experiences on my end and working in different industries, I'm like so confident that everything works its way out as it's supposed to be. Whether, you didn't get that job, clearly it pushed you into the world of fashion, or something horrible happens in your business, which, we'll talk about challenges. There's always like a green light or just something positive that comes from it, which sounds so cliche, but it's true. And I love that. I love to hear that you completely went in a different world. And I'm so glad you didn't get that job because we ultimately needed Pistola in our lives. So, you ended up spending a good, I believe, around 10 years in fashion. I think mostly for a lot of brick and mortar retailer. So maybe at a high level, you can talk about your experience there and maybe some of the biggest learnings that you had from that overall experience.
So after I started my career in planning and in analysis first, I was able to, really plan for different types of categories and different types of departments, all which operate a little bit differently when it comes to sell-throughs and, margins and, the expectations of the business plans for each category. And then later on, I really wanted to, that position and role was in San Francisco. And after having been there for 2-3 years, I did want to really try and come back and be closer to my family in LA. And so I actually took a planning position with BCBG and came down and planned for the BCBG women's tops business. And I think, during that time too, it was really just like formulating open to buys, looking at the product with the buyers and really planning kind of, the launch dates, the open to buy, the business strategy around it. Later on, I was given an opportunity to actually become a buyer, just because I think, I was able to prove my financial plans. And then also at the same time, I wanted growth in this buying and I wanted to have a little bit more say and a seat at the table of the picking and choosing of the product. So that opportunity was given to me. I think ultimately in that role, I was very much a self-starter. During those days, BCBG did not have the best credit. And so it was really more of an entrepreneurial skill set that I needed to have to go out and convince these manufacturers to give me the credit to buy. So that, of course, not by choice, but just, with how things were, it kind of presented an opportunity for me to figure out how to negotiate, as well as how to really get a business to buy in and ship product to us as well, too. And then afterwards, I ended up leading a brand new concept for BCBG called Lola. And it was a juniors and a young contemporary different concept that they had, where a girl would walk into her bedroom and her world and her closet space and be able to shop her entire closet, from accessories to shoes to tank tops and denim. So I was the lead merchant and buyer for that entire concept. Bought the entire store, saw it open. It had so much success that immediately we rolled it out to 5 stores.
Wow.
And shortly after that, I ended up leaving to take on a role with another merchant who really had desires to start his own chain stores. And I think during that time, I saw that as a huge opportunity for me to be able to, really have my hand in business, but also in like the magic of fashion and the curation and the style. And so in that role, I was tasked to sign leases, to sign short-term leases, to come up with the financial plans on my own, to buy for the entire store. So it was really my first stab at really just like an entrepreneurial role where I had to do everything for the business. I had to staff it. I was working with a part-time ERP guy who was really building out the systems, and I was telling him what type of reporting I needed and really mapping out like the weekly reporting that I would be able to use. So everything was really from bottoms up and built out. The challenges that I felt in these other businesses, though, is oftentimes as a woman and as a shopper myself, you know that in a shopping environment and in a space, you need magic, right? And you need the connection and you need the reason for existence. But oftentimes, when I did work in the past for this other retail concept store called SYLK, or even at BCBG, I think there was so much numbers that was weighing down the magic. And I feel oftentimes, I couldn't get my voice heard or my point across, and how important having an exciting collection was. That it wasn't about just, the dollar drivers and the table items and the core, but it was also about how can you have pieces at the front of the store that might not sell extremely well, but it's still going to draw that customer in and create that magic. So I think that was a time when I really had a desire to start something of my own. And so just because I wanted to express it and I wanted to do it the way that I wanted to do it, and I really had confidence in that. So that's kind of how that really shaped my early career, really shaped kind of the starting of an entrepreneurial spirit and a mindset.
Yeah, I love that so much, because I think there's nothing more valuable than getting experience working for different people. Like just even hearing your journey, you're able to be like the entrepreneur under someone's paycheck, under someone's idea. It might not be something you want ultimately, but there's so many learnings that come from that. And I think I just want to share that in case anybody's listening who's like, dang, I wish I started my own company already. There's so much that you can learn where you are today. And I know I was there, and it took me 10 years, maybe a little bit more, before I left and did my business. And there's so much that you can learn under someone's belt. So I love just hearing your experience and how you're inching closer and closer to you finding your voice of what you want, you building that confidence to like be in the unknown and do different things. And it seems like you said, you knew there was a different way of building a brand. So I think it was around 2013. Tell me more about those early steps, because you've built a really prominent career for yourself. I'm sure reputation in the fashion industry. Was it tough for you to leave it all? And did you just go cold turkey and start the company? Like, what did those early days look like?
Yeah, definitely. I think, again, having come from corporations and always, having the security of, having a paycheck. And again, I wasn't the entrepreneur. I wasn't the owner myself. However, just having that career path of being a buyer, being a merchant, and having security there was something that was very large for me. But then again, like everything in life, things are thrown at you, and it's never very linear. But during that time, I met my husband, and my husband's family had been in the denim industry for over 30 years. And so while denim is something that I have experience buying and merchandising and also planning around, it wasn't necessarily something that I knew so deeply about. And during that time period, I was still working for these other companies. And my mother-in-law, from time to time we would meet, and she was not my mother-in-law then, but she was my boyfriend's mom. She would often say, hey, why don't you maybe think about starting something on your own? And I think that was her way of, opening me up to the possibility of joining the family business. And at that time, I remember there's a lot of fears. I had my independence, I had my own career path, and the possibility of, going in and joining, my then boyfriend, who I knew, we were going to get married together, but a family business was also daunting and scary for all of its own separate reasons. But she definitely planted that seed. And as I thought about it more and more, I think it was really it was scary, but it was the perfect timing for me to be able to kind of express my own brand and to try doing things the way that I've wanted to do it, but haven't exactly been able to do in the past under other ownerships and other leaders. So that's when we decided, after we got married, the first year we got married, we decided to launch Pistola. And Pistola was really created to be affordable luxury. I think in my experience, there was a lot of white space in the market. There was the super premium, expensive denim brands who, were retailing at 200 and above. And then there was the really fast fashion, whether it be Forever 21 or, just much more faster fashion and not really focused on quality or fit. So I think, given my husband's family's experience in the denim world, in fashion, in the amazing fits, in the factories that they had, in the connections to the fabric mills, I saw the perfect opportunity to be able to bring fashion, style, great quality, but at this amazing opening, affordable price point. We're not the cheapest denim on the block, but again, our goal is to try and bring a premium quality product at a sensible and an opening price point. So that's kind of how it all got started.
And I'm so curious. That's so awesome with your mother-in-law bringing that up. And there's always someone that plants a seed. I even remember my husband kind of mentioned, why don't you, you've been saying you wanted to do your own thing, just go off and do it. And it's whatever reason that time it really hit. And I don't know, it was timing, I was almost ready. But how long, when she mentioned that to you, when did you eventually take the leap? So I know you guys she was not your mother-in-law at the time, but I just want to hear a little bit of the history and how much, that seed was really marinating behind the scenes before you went off and officially started.
Yeah, I think, since she planted that seed when we were dating to the official time that we launched was probably 18 months. Yeah. So it didn't happen overnight, right? I had to really simmer on it. I had to think about it. I had to maybe start looking at the denim business and his businesses and saying, can I understand this? Can I really join and be a part of it? So it did take some time for me to officially leave my job and to join full time. And then even after I joined full time, it took a couple of months for us to ruminate and come up with Pistola. And so it wasn't an overnight thing. It definitely took a little bit of time, but I think for me, I am pretty, cautious, and things have to really feel right for me to really go full force into the next step, because I was really building a name for myself and I was building a really healthy career as a merchant and as a buyer. So this was a complete shift. And so, yeah, after about, 12 to 18 months or so, when I did decide to join the family business and we did concept Pistola, we launched, a small denim capsule in the beginning. And really, we were focused on 5-pocket fits, right? That's what the family knew. That's what we were really good at. That's what all of our forte in terms of fabric and fits were in. And that's where it started. And, we actually, during that time period, were really focused on wholesale. That was kind of the way of doing business back then. We never launched Pistola with an intention to really blow it up direct to consumer. I think it was okay, how can we become the best brand that these major or even these specialty stores are going to do really well with? And so I think, that was the earlier stages of how we built out the team and how we really kind of grew the business. Is our product needed to fit so well, be such great quality, and also have our finger on the pulse of style to be able to perform well for, specialty stores. We got into Bloomingdale's. We were hyper focused on, its performance in Bloomingdale's. And so that was the earlier stages of Pistola, is really heads down, product, quality, fit, and really making sure that no matter where Pistola sat, that it performed well for our retailers.
And I have a few questions here, so I'm just jotting that down. But I want to talk about the family business part, because I worked with my dad for a little bit before I went off on my own, and it was very different. There's beautiful things from it. So I would love to hear, what were the dynamics like? You joined the family. I know your husband is also in this world in the in-laws. So were they involved with the ideation? Like how were the roles and responsibilities kind of divided?
Yes, I think my in-laws, the thing that I commend about them so much is in the very beginning when I did join the business and we were launching a brand new concept, they were really, really good about letting us do us.
That's
so
big.
I think, looking back and had I been a mother-in-law and I see, this young girl try to start a business, I think I would have so much to say and so many cautionary comments. But I think in hindsight, really what I appreciate the most is them just letting us do us and letting us try what we wanted to try. And I think I know for a fact, and just in hindsight, I could think of 10,000 mistakes that I made, and that was very costly for the business. And even during that time, I think it's very easy to say, see, I told you so, or hey, don't do this, or don't do that, or that's not the way to do this in fabric, or whatnot. But they let me make the mistakes, and they didn't kind of kill my, they didn't necessarily critique me so much to the point of me losing my confidence, but it was just them letting us do what we had to do. And, luckily we were able to really learn and grow from those mistakes. And it's not to say that we didn't make mistakes again, but we were really able to kind of teach ourselves the business acumens of this denim world in a large way. And when we asked for their guidance, they gave us our guidance. But I think really the amazing thing about my in-laws is that they let us do us, and they did not get involved very heavily or, butt into the nit and gritty or the brand or anything like that, just because that is something that they felt that we would have been better at as well too, right? And so I think that was that. I think really kind of the formulation is Kevin really knew the operations and, the production world. And he was out there sourcing a lot of the vendors and just kind of creating the whole operation cycle. My father-in-law was head of finance, and my mother-in-law was head of pattern and tech. So she is truly the most amazing, denim fit technician. She really understands, the fit of the garment. So she was very pivotal in kind of helping us really come up with the fits that we wanted to and make it fit really, really, really well. And so that was kind of the early makeup of Pistola, of how we operated it. I was head of brand, I was head of design, I was head of marketing, and also head of sales and the sales strategy for what we wanted the brand to look and feel like. So that was the early ideation of Pistola.
Sounds like amazing in-laws. I feel like when I was working with my dad, love you, Dad. I don't think you're listening to this conversation, but he'd be like, I've been 60 years in business. I know how to do it. And it's like you said, it's so easy to jump in and stop you from, making that next step. So I love that they really took that approach of letting you lead, learning from your mistakes, because now that I'm in my own business, I make mistakes all the time. And that's the only way for you to learn, to figure out what's the right next step. So it's just part of doing business. So I love that. So I'm curious, in those early days, you mentioned, there's so many mistakes that you're doing, so many challenges. Is there anything that you remember early on? And I know this is over 10 years ago, but anything where you're this didn't go right or made you a little bit nervous, given there's a different kind of pressure when it's a family business, right? You're I don't know if you had ever had any worries of what happens if this doesn't work out. There's still a lot of pressure there, but and does that kind of spark any stories or any feelings from the early days when you weren't sure if it was really going to hit?
I think there were so many moments across all different aspects of business where there was worries of if this isn't going to work out, or, is this trade show that we're paying a lot of money to attend, is this going to be profitable? Or is the style, and most of the styles that we had to book back then, we were so small that we were not cutting into the minimums, and we were going to be stuck with inventory. And so we really had to believe in the style and say, okay, we think we can sell this. But every single style and every single purchase order was very nerve-wracking, because it really did take a level of, risk of, okay, if this doesn't work out, then what are we going to do? So I think every aspect of the business during that time, and especially because it was a family business and we were all into it, it was very serious, and there was a lot of, it was a lot of stakes and high stakes. And so all parts of the business were stressful, in all honesty. I don't think there was, and I think through those mistakes too, luckily we were able to get through all of the mistakes, but there was also wins as well. But I think truly looking back, if there was a moment where I could say I didn't want to do this, I wish this mistake never happened. I wouldn't take away a mistake, because that truly is how you learn and how you pivot and how you become a better entrepreneur and a better business person, right? So all of those mistakes needed to happen for Pistola to get to where we are today. Whether it was a business decision or whether it was a style decision or whether it was a hiring decision, all of those mistakes truly did teach and learn and guide me to be able to make better decisions throughout all the rest of the years of Pistola.
And looking back at those early days, did you ever envision the brand to be where it is today? What were you thinking Pistola was going to be? We have a lot of founders that are like, yeah, I actually did manifest and envision that we'd be here. Or some founders are like, I actually didn't even realize it could be this big or it would turn out the way it did. How do you kind of think about that as you reflect on the past, over 10 years?
If I remember the first, year of Pistola, I don't think that it was ever a part of my vision board for Pistola to be as big as it is today. It's the honest truth. I think for us during that time, we were hyper focused on, okay, how can we hit the minimum of a style that I have to cut? And I think that was success to me. And I think the next success would have been, hey, how can I get into a major department store, right? And so when we did get into Bloomingdale's, that was the biggest celebration moment, because that was like, okay, finally we got into a major department store. And in all honesty, we thought that after that it was going to be so much easier, but it wasn't. I think to get into our next major department store, it took another 2 years. And so it was always these shorter goals ahead of other goals. And I think really never in the beginning stages of Pistola did we ever imagine that we were going to be, an omni-channel brand selling both in wholesale, in D2C, and having international expansion. That wasn't a part of it, but I think as we hit one successful milestone after another, I think the potential really became bigger, and our strategy of where there was open market space where we could possibly expand into also got a lot bigger. I think alongside that too, I think along with the experience, your confidence also starts to kind of build, and your ability to kind of cut through the noise and see business for what it is. I think that level of wisdom and that confidence also helps you have, a better strategy for the business forward as well too.
That was all gold. Everybody should just rewind and listen to what you said. That really resonates. And I love that you were just focused on the next milestone, like going into wholesale, then getting your second one and your third one. And like you said, a lot of people think once you made it into Bloomingdale's, you've made it. And it only gets more difficult and harder, and there's different problems that come up. But I love what you said about the confidence, because I actually was just telling my husband, I was on this meeting, a CEO founder call, and there was no women there, which is why there was women invited, but they couldn't make it. And I showed up and it was all men. And Yasmin 3 years ago would have been a little nervous, insecure. I have to talk about the business. And now that it's only been 3 years, I feel like my confidence has definitely built, where I have no problem asking the dumb question and kind of listening to people. And back in the day, I would be swayed, oh, should we do this? Should we do that? But I now am so open to listening, but I have a gut feeling of, okay, this is kind of right for the business. So I just love what you said about the confidence piece, because the more you're in business, I feel like the more you just kind of understand the right next step that's truly better for you. And it's something that you can't write a business plan, or at least we didn't, right? And it doesn't seem like you were like, this is what we're going to do in 10 years. I'm like, this shit changes every 3 to 6 months, right?
No, definitely. I think what you said is so true for me too, in that in the early stages of Pistola, again, our goal was to be able to cut into the minimums, right? And to be able to have enough handful of specialty stores, a handful of major stores, so that we can really cut our minimums. But really, I think the confidence level then was, oh my goodness, is this going to sell? Is this the right next fit? Is this the right design? Is this the right wash, right? And I think there was a lot of looking outwards to see what other people were doing, or, hey, do you think this is cute? Do you like this? And I think over the years, and I'm not sure that I could have had this without the experience and without all the fails and also the successes, but now more than ever, I do look I think it's more about what I think is the next right thing. So do I like that wash? Do I think that that fit is very necessary within the assortment? Do I think that this is a style that women are really going to need in their closets, and it's going to be a style that they love and enjoy wearing, and it's going to feel super comfortable on them? So I think that level of confidence that you build throughout your career to be able to finally get to your kind of true authentic self and your true authentic brand, and to be able to exercise that, I think, is a whole nother level of kind of brand authenticity and the reason for existence for your brand as well too. So that's really something that, I feel like has been driving our brand, for the past 3-4 years. And it necessarily wasn't that way from the get-go 10 years ago when we launched it.
I love that because, just reiterating what you said, that brand authenticity takes time to really understand. And I feel like in the early days, and this was us, it was like, what's the right marketing strategy, or what is our brand? And now, again, I'm so early, it's like you're still figuring that piece out. And it's like listening to your customer. And then one year you iterate in one way, and then you try something different. And I love that you said in time, you really know your brand and authenticity. And that's just the beauty of continuing to take one foot in front of the other and staying in business. So I look at someone like you, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to be 7 years in. I'll be like, I know exactly what we're doing. And you just hone in more on that gut feeling that you've mentioned. Like, you really know your brand, and, it's like your child. So I also know that wholesale, you mentioned, was the main thing that you guys were doing, which was so common back in the day. Like, so many brands launched that way. And then I think it was 2016, you started going direct to consumer. What was the rationale behind that? And was it a big focus of the brand then, or was there a tipping point a few years later for growing sales on that channel?
So back in the earlier stages of Pistola, I mentioned that we were very wholesale focused, meaning that when we got into a Bloomingdale's or even a Revolve or a Shopbop or a Nordstrom's, they were buying the styles that was right for their customers, right? And then they were styling it and they were shooting around it to speak to their audience and their consumers. So we really didn't have a lot of control over, what is truly the DNA of Pistola. I think, it was showcased as what these other retailers thought it was, and they were interpreting the collection in their own separate ways. I think that's when I really grew a desire to showcase what I wanted Pistola to stand for. I think some retailers were making it a little too girly. I think some other retailers were making it a little too sexy. And I'm like, hold on, that's not how we envisioned this line. This is how I wanted to envision it. And so that was the early impetus for why we launched DTC, is really just to show the full range of our collection and to maybe have a photo shoot or two that really kind of showcased how we envisioned our woman wearing the style. So we didn't really launch it with this huge plan of having a huge D2C business. It was really just to show our authentic self, and that's why we launched it. And then year over year, what we found is such an organic desire for the brand. And so without ad spend, without marketing, without much, it was organically growing year over year. And in the beginning, Pistola e-com was everybody's part-time job. So everybody leaned in to set up the product. Then another person from a different department would lead in to set it up. And then a different person, and then ultimately, with organic growth, we needed its own key players. And so that's when we started slowly but surely building out the e-com platform and building out the separate team members. It wasn't really until we started dabbling and, hiring its own members, and then dabbling into, stories and, paid media and paid digital spend, that we really saw the growth. And after that, we experienced another hyper growth after the pandemic, when people were really looking for denim and they were looking for lifestyle pieces after they were done wearing their sweatpants, right? So that's another level where people were really looking towards DTC brands or even the online shopping space to be able to shop for their outfits and wardrobes when they couldn't go to, stores or these major department stores. So that was another major growth for the brand there.
And was it tough? Like you mentioned, it was hyper growth, I'm sure, around the pandemic time. Was that challenging for the business? Did you have enough inventory on hand? Was there any infrastructure that you didn't have in place to support this demand that was coming through?
Yeah, I think, along with hyper growth, you can only imagine that just means that it's a lot more orders to fulfill. It's a lot more customer questions that are coming through. So from even people who are shipping out the product to even just our customer service representatives not being able to attend to every single question in a day, we were short-staffed all over the place. And I think during that time too, it was a really tough time because I think a lot of people didn't want to come to work, or, they had different plans. So I don't know if you guys remember, it was called the Great Resignation. So a lot of people were moving back home. They were shifting jobs. And so that was a really tough time period just in being able to staff properly for the size of the business as well. That, it was painful, but that's also growing pains. You kind of learn the staffing that you need in accordance to the sales plan and the sales strategy that you have. I think during those times, the supply chain was also really difficult too. USA wasn't the only country that had COVID. We also had it in, Mexico, and it was also in, Turkey, where our fabric came from. It was also in China. So at all different points, there were so many challenges, from supply chain all the way to, us being able to have a photo shoot to showcase the product, all the way to us being able to fulfill the product with, the pickers and the packers, as well as the customer service representatives. It was a really challenging time, but I think it was a really great learning experience for us to know, what we really needed in order to sustain this business. And I think just not to put all of our eggs in one basket in, different supply chain areas, and to spread it out. So there's a lot of learning lessons and a lot of challenges there.
Oh my God, I feel the stress of that. Even taking COVID out of the picture, dealing with hypergrowth is already very challenging. Like, you're changing the business, you're building the infrastructure, you're figuring out staff, and then put a pandemic on top of that affects every aspect. That major props. I can't even imagine what was going on, for a few years. And did you just have delays? Would you just communicate that to customers, or were you able to just get things on time despite all the chaos behind the scenes?
There were a lot of delays. I pride our company in being one that's really able to ship well and not have a lot of delays. But even there were things that were completely just outside of our control. And there were a lot of delays. There was a lot of changes. That was a very reactionary stage of our business. I think, again, coming from a planning background, I like to be very proactive and know exactly when styles are going to hit and to be able to plan around our business. But I think during those times, you needed a lot of grit because you had to react to so many different problems and, just left field issues that you weren't even accounting for to be thrown at you. And so it really took a lot of grit to be able to manage through each step of all the different challenges that were being thrown at you.
I'm sure you're I don't want to keep talking about this time because it was so tough. You probably want it in the past, but just thinking about that, I'm sure it was a good 2 years of you being in the grid and the nitty gritty of everything. But you also have, 3 young kids, I believe at the time. And I'm just wondering, are you pretty good at dividing, work life with your personal life? Or how did you manage, I don't want to put words in your mouth, the feeling of overwhelm and everything you're going through? Or maybe you look back at the time, you're I actually didn't do that well. I'm just curious about your mental health and your personal life and how you navigate through that. Because that's actually one thing that I am learning so much about just being in business. I'm all right, I'm not going anywhere. The business isn't going anywhere. And there's always going to be challenges, but creating that space and being able to not feel overwhelmed is something that I'm always thinking about. So I was just curious about you.
Yeah, I think, having 3 kids and this growing business, it's definitely not easy. I think as women, we talk about balance a lot, but there are going to be times where there is no balance. I do remember very dark times where I was extremely stressed out, but I still had to figure out my kids' schedule, my kids, babysitting schedule, and who's going to take care of the kids during this time, who's going to pick them up from school. So there were moments in time where I was stretched very, very, very thin. So I think ultimately, though, what I did learn through just the hyper growth and just the crazy busyness of life in general is that I think as a woman especially, you have to find ways to sustain yourself. And I think that's not even something that, I've learned back then. It's really something that I'm starting to really try to practice now. So whether it's moments that I can go to, on a vacation with the girls trip to really just unwind. If it's finding time in the day for me to be able to work out, even if it's just twice a week where I can really get my mind off of work. Or it's even different moments of, saying, I really want to try this meditation class. Or I do think definitely the key to being able to manage it all and to balance it all is to be able to sustain your own well-being. And I think if you can figure out a way to take care of yourself, I think then you can kind of figure out how to take care of everything else that needs to be taken care of as well too. So it really is a juggle. I feel like sometimes you have better balance and sometimes you don't, but I think the true key for me that I found is when I can feel like I'm somewhat taken care of and I can prioritize myself, at least in, small moments of, hey, did I have time to eat? Do I have time to, go and get a massage or go and take the Pilates class that I want to? I find that I can manage all the craziness of life a lot better. It's when I don't make that time for myself and I'm running for business and then I'm running at home for the kids and I'm just juggling family life and work life and there's no time for me, is when I really do find myself burning out and just constantly being stressed out and anxious.
And it's so interesting because, whether you have a business or not, life will always get bigger. There will always be something. And it's like with a growing business and a family and your personal life, it's like, what can we all do to, like you said, sustain that level of mental health for yourself? Because the problems won't ever go away. It's just like, how are you going to roll with them? And especially as they get bigger and bigger, it's like, yeah, I think about that all the time. And it's good that, you mentioned like carving out time for yourself and making sure you're okay, because I think as women, we're always thinking about other people and it's so easy to not think about yourself.
Yeah. And I think even in business and in running a business, in the very beginning, I think I was very naive and every single issue and every problem just seemed so big. But I think, you come to a point where you just understand that your job is, to put out fires and you are just dealing with one problem after another. So it's not really seeing it as, like this big, challenge and, this moment of fear for all these problems that the businesses have. But I think it's my acceptance of that is just my job. Like I am going to be putting out fires. There's always going to be an issue. And I think when you kind of have that mindset shift, I think also like you kind of like envision those problems a little bit differently, and it's not something that's so stressful, but just another problem that you have to overcome and another task that you have to oversee.
Oh, it's so true. And honestly, I learned that from this podcast because in those very early days, every problem is like the world is ending. And the emotional weight that goes with it, it's like too much. It's like there's no way you can live in that state and be happy running a business for like a decade. But it's so true. When I realize, and speaking to women like you, I'm like, oh, like being in business is problems, especially you as the founder. It's your job. And if it was easy, anybody would do it, right?
100%.
So once you get to that point of like, oh, this is just part of business, it makes it feel a lot lighter. So I agree with what you said. It's a big mindset shift there for sure. So, before we are jumping on the podcast, you mentioned something, and I love this topic and I want to talk about it, where you said, the past 10 years, we've just been so heads down building the brand. And I have so many friends who have also been in a similar position where they're like, I never did podcasts. I never went to events because I was so heads down for 10 years, mind you, like not like 3 years, 4 years. So tell me more about what you mean by that, about being heads down for a decade and what has shifted now.
Definitely. So for the past 10 years, we really have been focused on, quality, fit, and the assortment, right? So the fashion part of it. And I think, having been brand new to manufacturing denim, I had a lot to learn. And so year over year, the goal was to get better and to get better and to get better. But I think I had to really feel like the brand was ready to be kind of broadcasted to the world until I wanted to really take a stab at marketing. And so I think, I am my own worst critic, and I'm really, really, really critical about my product as well as our brand. But I do feel that, in the past 2-3 years, we've finally come a long way where I really believe that with our processes and with our values and with our fits and with everything in business, that we finally had this like collection that was really strong. I loved our fits. I loved our quality. And I really loved the designs that we were being able to bring to the table. And so that's when I said, okay, maybe we do take the next step at marketing. Up until now, it's been very organic, and, we're very thankful for that, because I think, the quality of the product is what really sold itself up until today. And now it's just about how can we, create a little bit more of a story that consumers can really resonate with. Like, why did we create this product? What was the reasoning behind it? And so really marketing is something that we've really touched upon and really invested in only about a little over a year ago. And so I think, again, like being able to do these podcasts and, even to be able to share the brand is rather new, because really like, running the production and running the assortment and running, the sales is truly a full-time job. So I think it's really just believing that the brand is really ready to be kind of broadcasted to the world, really being confident in the product story and in the quality of our product is really what felt like the right step for us to be able to now go out and garner brand awareness.
One thing you mentioned when you were answering this was, you are so critical of yourself and the brand. And I feel like so many founders, we're so critical of ourselves, not to others. I'm my worst enemy. I have so much grace for team members. I have so much grace for friends. Like, we are so nuts behind the scenes. Or maybe that's like a blanket statement, but the critical aspect is something also that even as you start a business or even this podcast, it really opened up the floodgates of like, wow, I didn't realize I was so hard on myself. So how have you navigated that?
Yeah, I think that's actually something that I feel like I've been reflecting on recently, is that I do feel like I was extremely critical on myself. I think, just growing up in the corporate world as well too, I always feel like I had something to prove, and I felt like I needed to do it perfectly and I needed to do it well. And that's the way that I was going to move up. But even in business too, and like, this is my first brand that I've ever kind of, exercised too, I think I was very critical of the product and very critical of everything. And listen, in life, nothing is perfect. And I think when I see other founders and other brands be confident, even through kind of like the mistakes and the issues in their brand, I think ultimately nobody is perfect. And I think as long as you have, a business and a system and a value-driven process with your brand, I think that gave me the confidence, like the years of, really just like critiquing the product and seeing what else was out there. I think and also the maturity factor, it just gave me the confidence to be able to say, you know what, it's definitely ready. It's actually been ready. So one of my regrets is that I didn't put it out there sooner. But, it was my process. It was my learning lesson and my learning curve. But I think just maybe it's also a female thing where I think women are just much more critical of themselves and their work than, potentially other male founders and, male-led brands are, right? But I think everything happens for a reason. I think today, that's why when people do discover Pistola, I think they're very impressed and they're very delighted by the fit, the quality and whatnot. And it's almost kind of like, garnering this excitement around the product. So I'm really excited. It happened the way it was supposed to happen for us.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you're right. When I put on the jeans, I was like, oh, wow, this is like really nicely done jeans. And I didn't know much about you. I didn't know much about the brand. And it makes sense. You have 10 years, of work and fit and you really being so critical about creating the best product. So once you're really out there and, scaling to another level, like you said, the past 2 years, the product is in a solid position. So, pros and cons, but I think there's a lot of positivity to have waited. But I appreciate you sharing that because I do think we can all be our worst critic, and it's just moving past that. And I share that because a lot of people listening in who, might not have started that business yet, think it's only them. And I'm like, every woman, we all have these demons. It's just pushing through it and still showing up. And we don't have the answers. Like during the times where you said this was your first brand, you're figuring out, no one's been in a pandemic before. Like, you were navigating new things all the time and you just figure it out. So I love that because so many people also wait until they're so ready. And sometimes I think, it's good to be thoughtful about the jump and then to like really go into it in that sense. But no, I love that. And one thing I was so curious about, I'm always curious about like press, celebrity. I know Greta Gerwig wore your jumpsuit. Did you guys, and this is, for anyone listening, the Barbie movie, I don't know where she wore it, but did you know she was going to wear it? And did that have an impact on the brand in any sense?
Yeah, so I think, again, we weren't very focused on, any type of like marketing, inclusive of like influencer partnerships or anything like that. So a lot of what you saw out there was very organic and it was authentic. I had no idea that Greta Gerwig was going to wear the pink Rover jumpsuit on the set of Barbie, which is, completely epic. And I couldn't have like, imagined a better scenario for us. as well. But it was a surprise. I think somebody sent me a picture of Greta Gerwig wearing the pink jumpsuit. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. I wonder where she bought that from. And then later on, the impact that had on the brand and just on our jumpsuit sales in general was massive. People were, really seeking out the pink jumpsuit, whether it was for themselves or even all throughout, Halloween, them wanting to be Greta Gerwig for Halloween too. But that was 100% organic. And I find that those authentic and organic fans of the brand really do the most for us. And I think, we really do want to find authenticity and people who truly love the product because they love the product. I don't believe in, really paying people to put the product out there and to talk. I don't want, disingenuous fans either. I really do believe that, you look and feel the best when you are wearing something that feels comfortable and flattering and amazing. And I think to have authentic brands, fans of the brand is the most valuable asset for us when it does come to influencers and this whole marketing gamut.
And were you doing pink because of the Barbie movie, or was that something you guys had?
We had that. We had
Really?
that pink jumpsuit for over a year, and that pink jumpsuit actually sold well even prior to Barbie. It's a very flattering pink color, but it just could not have been the most perfect. It was the most perfect jumpsuit for Barbie, So it was even, she wore it after we had that jumpsuit for about a year and a half, but we actually made that style a core even before she wore it because it was doing so well for us. And then it was the perfect alignment. We had inventory. It was a part of our core collection, and then Greta wore it. And it just kind of took off. Yeah.
I love to hear stories.
So the stars were perfectly aligned for that situation.
Yeah, and it was years in the making, right?
Yeah.
You've been doing this day in and day out.
Yes.
And so, the opportunity and luck kind of hit. So I'm so glad to hear that. So I'm also curious. I know we talked about a lot of different qualities for entrepreneurship throughout this interview, but from your perspective, what do you think most people get wrong when it comes to starting and running a company?
I think a lot of people don't understand the leadership, right, that one is going to need in order to run a company. Oftentimes, you don't start a business thinking that you're going to be the best leader or you're going to be, the top leader, and you're going to have to then manage, 10 people, 20 people. And that in and of itself is an entirely different skill set and, a full-time job as well, too. So I think that is kind of what I hear from a lot of other founders as well, too, is that it's just what comes along with this other business plan that you have. There's a product, and then there's the whole business, and then there's the leadership and the management of, your employees, your staff, your contractors, your agencies, and all of that. I also think what people might get wrong too is just how much grit is involved. I think we spoke about, nothing ever being a complete linear path, and also too, a lot of hardships along the way. And I think, you really have to be resilient through each of the challenges. It's not all, good news, and it's all not wins after another win, but it's really problem after problem. And sometimes there's a win, and that win gives you enough kind of energy and motivation to get to the next step. But I think the resilience and the grit part is huge, as well as just knowing and being ready to be a leader in your organization as the business grows.
I love that. It's so true, because you don't think about how your job is going to change. You hire one person, two people, it grows to 10, it goes to 20. That's a whole other beast. And I think leadership, like you said, is so key. And it's not something that we learn. Do you have a group of founder friends or a business coach or anything in your network that kind of helps you navigate or helps you kind of up level as you are growing with this business?
To be completely honest, I think while we were building Pistola, heads down, I was truly heads down. And I think that also meant heads down socially as well, too. I didn't really, have the time to take these social meetings or these social coffee meet and greets or whatnot, too. So a lot of it felt very lonely because, it felt like once you have a business and a business plan that does feel like it's fulfilling a white space, you kind of need to figure out your own path and chart your own path. And I think during that time, I looked to a lot of podcasts. I looked to, a lot of other leaders who had books. And I think that was where I kind of turned to when I did have time. I really loved, looking, and I still love looking at Ray Dalio for all of his, business principles. But yeah, during those times, in all honesty, it was a lonely road of just figuring it out with me, myself, and also my husband. I think more recently is when I'm meeting these female founders, and what I'm loving is, the community of female founders and how open they are, and how, there's so much camaraderie around, wow, business is hard. Like running a business is really hard. Oh, you have that issue too? Okay, me too. Okay, well, let me give you this connect. Oh, I use this person too. I think that camaraderie is something that I am more recently in the past 1 to 2 years experiencing, and finding that it's been so uplifting and rewarding, and just so great to kind of build that network. But in the earlier stages, I don't, in all honesty, I didn't have that.
And I've heard that. I have a lot of friends who are like, I was so heads down with the business for 8 years. I had no friends. It was all business. And it's like, if there's one thing I wish I did, I wish I continued building community and friendship, because having that outside of your business is healthy, right? I'm sure also having kids, like a separate identity, because you're so in it. So just because I'm hearing you and my friends who have gone through that say that, I'm like, okay, I'm going to make sure I still have friends, because even me, I get so stuck in the weeds. And honestly, a big part of me staying out is this podcast. I'm like, you leave me, I'm just going to be working all the time behind a computer. And it's nice to maintain that community if you can, and of other like-minded women, because like you said, you feel less alone. And there's so many times where you're just like behind the scenes of a computer. And again, like you said, we're always the ones dealing with problems, and you're like, man, I don't even know what to do. Like, you're figuring things out. And it's nice to be able to talk to someone who's gone through it, or just to be like, yeah, I know it's hard and it sucked. You're like, okay, cool. Like, nice. I'm not the only one. I'm not crazy. Yeah.
100%.
I love it. No, it's so real. Well, I love this conversation. I want to end on one last question. You mentioned a few things that you're excited about for Pistola, but anything that comes to mind with the brand, or you personally, that's coming up that gets you excited about this next phase of your life?
Yeah, definitely. I think, with the brand, I think we're experiencing, so many people being excited about the brand, both wholesale and retail. So we're really excited about all of the growth opportunities that we have in both of those avenues. I think also too, as we grow our direct-to-consumer footprint, I think definitely it's within our plans to be able to look at, different opportunities of how to connect with the consumer, whether it's pop-up stores or even, brick and mortar stores. So I think that's something that's really exciting about the brand. And just on a personal note too, I think, with the 3 kids and being able to really kind of, connect outside of work, and to be able to sustain myself with, just really enjoyable activities with my kids, and also things that I find is helping me with both my mental and my physical state. I think those are kind of my personal focuses. Just finding more times to enjoy myself and to enjoy kind of my time with my family while running the business. I think just having and maintaining and being the owner of that balance, I think is really important.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, Grace, I learned so much from you. What an incredible story. Big fan of you and the brand. I'm so excited for these pop-up shops. I will be right in there buying everything, but this was so much fun. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. I had so much fun.